with Will on 531 VI.
It is 9 minutes past 7 o'clock for Tuesday, the 16th of September. I'm William Teresi. It's good to be in your company this morning. Kia ora, morena to you. Now, a major shake-up could be on the cards for the public service. The Commissioner is reviewing whether smaller agencies like the Ministry for Pacific Peoples should be absorbed into larger government departments. Supporters say it could mean efficiency and savings, but critics warn it risks diluting Pacifica voices and leading to worse outcomes for our communities. Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour joins me to discuss that and much more. Very good morning to you. Kia ora.
Good morning.
Why is dismantling MPP, I suppose, a good thing, would you say?
Well, the question is, I think, why have it? I've been in government and around Wellington for over a decade now, and I don't see where they're making a difference. And I'll just give you one example. I've been very involved in the charter school policy. I believe that has the potential and has made in the past a massive difference for Pacific New Zealanders. But I just ask, well, what has been the contribution of having a Ministry for Pacific Peoples to that? I don't really see it. In fact, the first charter school iteration, or I guess the first wave of them, occurred before the MPP was created. The second was created entirely independent of any kind of input from them. So I would just ask the question, if you see something positive that's happening, that is opening up new educational opportunities, is that reliant on having this MPP? Actually, you can do it without them. And that leads to the question, well, if they're not influencing that, what are they helping with?
I see the point you're making. I mean, Pacific people continue to be overrepresented in stats and many factors, and not the best way possible. I suppose, though, if they didn't exist, there's that argument to be had that it would actually lead to worse outcomes. What do you say to that? You don't know until you've tried?
Well, I guess the challenge is to justify, well, when exactly have they led to better outcomes? If somebody can show me that, then let's ask, first of all, did they do that? And second of all, was it necessary for them to exist for it to happen? I suspect you really struggle to find examples. But, I mean, to be honest, I hope we could have a slightly different discussion here, which is not about one, very small ministry that has a few dozen people in it, and it's not obvious what it has done for Pacific people. I think there's a bigger question of why do people have so much frustration with government generally? Why do people find it so difficult to get the results they want and see the government responding to their needs? And I think that's not just in New Zealand, it's actually around the world. But there's a lot of people particularly frustrated here, including me. And I think one of the reasons for that is that we have a government now with 46 different departments or Crown entities. We have 30 ministers. We have 82, I think, portfolios. We have some departments, such as the Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment, which has 23 different ministers that they answer to. We have some ministers who have 7 different departments where they're in charge of a part of it. And one of the results of that is that it's very difficult to know who's in charge and who's responsible for getting a result. Now, you compare that to a country like Ireland. They also have 5 million people, but they only have 16 ministers and I think something like 20 departments. So over there, who's in charge, who you're reporting to. The voters know which minister's responsible for getting a result. And I have to say, if you look at people getting out of poverty, becoming wealthier, living better lives, Ireland's had a much better 21st century than New Zealand so far. If we want to turn that around, I would say we need radical simplicity, and that is going to mean fewer departments. The MPP might be one of those departments you say, I'm not sure we need that one anymore, but I wouldn't want to make this all about one department. I wouldn't want to have a conversation where we say the only thing Pacific people need is a Pacific department. That's not true. Pacific people and every person in New Zealand needs a government that actually works, and that's what these changes are about.
Sure. Look, I just want to get your take on some of the outcomes from the Pacific Islands Forum, or perhaps lack thereof, depending on who you ask. Will New Zealand, do you think, commit to cutting methane as Pacific leaders are demanding, even if that means confronting the farming lobby?
Well, it depends what sort of outcome they want. If they would like 40 million people who are fed by New Zealand around the world to leave purchasing from us and start purchasing from farmers around the world who actually produce more greenhouse gases for each unit of food, then we could do that. But not only will it make the climate worse, which I heard was their concern, it will also severely reduce the resources in the New Zealand economy, a lot of which we actually direct to assisting our friends around the Pacific. So I would just push back gently at people making these demands and say, look, are you sure this is what you want? Because people around the world won't stop eating food. They'll just buy it from farmers who, A, emit more into the atmosphere to produce the food, and B, do not pay tax to the New Zealand government, which is extremely generous in assisting other governments around the Pacific with development. So I'm not sure they're on the right track there.
Sure. I mean, how can we also, as New Zealanders, claim to stand with the Pacific while also perhaps ignoring climate threat as the key existential crisis facing the Pacific?
Well, you can take that view, but I just make 2 points to you. One is that New Zealand's killing its agriculture or severely reducing its agriculture is not going to change the global picture. Remember, it used to be called global warming because it's a global thing. The second point I would make is that when it comes to managing climate change, there are two basic approaches. One is to mitigate, in other words, reduce the emissions in the hope that that will change the climate. Now, that's an option, but New Zealand's ability to influence that is very small because our overall contribution is very small. On the other hand, you can adapt, and that means accepting that there will always be bad weather. Climate change or not, weather is always a danger. It has been as long as people have been living in the Pacific.
Sure.
And the question is, do you have the infrastructure, the drainage, the strong buildings, all of the things that you require to adapt to the changes occurring? We can help with that much more powerfully than we can try and change the world's climate.
Just put simply, the ACT Party, do you recognise and believe in climate change?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that the climate is a dynamic system. Some would say a chaotic system. It's one of the biggest drivers of how we live. And what's more, it's true that humans emitting greenhouse gases have had some effect on that. All of that is true. It's not a question of belief. It's a question of what are the facts. But then once you get out of this do you believe corner, then you can actually join hands and start solving the problem. And I would make the case that kneecapping efficient farmers won't help. Doing adaptation, which New Zealand is in a position to help its neighbours with, will make a lot more difference.
Couldn't agree more. Look, just very quickly on labour mobility at the Pacific Islands Forum, that was another key topic. Leaders want freer movement of Pacific workers. Do you think New Zealand will actually shift immigration settings or keep hiding behind said rhetoric?
Well, in all my experience, there's actually a bit of a double position from most leaders. They will say, if you open up the recognised seasonal employer scheme, for example, we don't want all of the people from our country to leave and go to New Zealand. We want them to come back.
Sure.
I think there's actually not as simple as Pacific leaders want New Zealand to open up and New Zealand doesn't want to open up. New Zealand, benefits hugely, or at least the New Zealand's horticultural industry in particular benefits enormously from the recognised seasonal employer scheme. There's also a lot of other visa categories, skilled migrants, for example, where people coming from the Pacific can get great opportunities for themselves and enrich New Zealand business. So I always see migration as a win-win. If there's specific areas around the margin that they want to talk about, my party is always in favour of letting people come to our country so long as they follow the rules and are productive. So, I don't know that we're as far apart as they suggest.
Just very quickly on Palestinian statehood and your capacity as Deputy Prime Minister, what's with the delay and the hold-up? Some would argue it's theatrics.
Well, I think that's a little unfair to say it's theatrical. There are serious questions that need to be answered. One is, if you're going to recognize Palestine, what are you recognizing? Remember, you need a state with clear borders, you need a state with a clear government, and you need to be able to ask, well, what happens next? So at the moment, you've got a state with unclear borders. The government, such as it exists, is a terrorist organization, and recognizing them might be seen as endorsing the terrorism because basically they attacked Israel, brutally raped and murdered and held hostages, killed 1,500 people, and at the end of it, they got what they wanted. Well, I don't think that's a very good lesson for the world.
Yeah, sure, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, what do you make of the fact that, there are children and there are women and those everyday civilians that have been caught up in this crossfire?
Well, that's absolutely horrendous. But I just notice that the same thing can be said of South Sudan, where 500,000 people have been killed in the last few years. And some of these people who say, look, New Zealand absolutely must act. If we don't act, then we are an immoral people and will go down poorly in history. None of them are out protesting for South Sudan. I think it's more accurate to say there are some horrific things going on around the world. Of course we should care. My heart breaks when I see these images of children being harmed and starving. It's terrible. No one doubts that. But we also need to ask ourselves, what is the position the New Zealand government can take that will help with the situation and maintain our country's esteem and mana as an honest dealer in global politics? And rushing off, selectively choosing one conflict to put a thumb on the scale, which is going to, in effect, endorse terrorists, that's not such a good place to be.
What do you make of, just more broadly now, politics at the moment, not only here in our own backyard, but globally? I recognise an ACT Party candidate's billboard or hoarding was shot at just last week. It seems just pretty violent.
We need to remember what we've got. And I like to think about human history going back about 300,000 years, which, and I may be wrong about the anthropology, but that's about how long humans or someone like us has existed. For most of that 300,000 years, basically had people running around whacking each other over the head, murdering, enslaving, raping, terrible things wherever people went. It's only in the last 100, 200 years that some parts of the world have managed to achieve real universal human rights where people can go about their life and not have to physically fight for their safety every day. I mean, that's the reality. And I think sometimes we make a mountain out of quite a small molehill and say that person's bad. We forget how high the stakes are and how much we have to lose living in a free and democratic society. So I would just call on people to say, look, hang on a second. These things that you're angry about, how big are they really? And can they be resolved democratically? I would say usually the answer is yes. And I'd also just say, there's a lot of everyone's evil and everyone's bad and they're out to do bad things. In my experience, most people, most of the time, are just trying to get through the day and make the best of each situation they can. And if you start from that point of view, often you'll be surprised what you can achieve.
Just very quickly before we wrap it up, Charlie Kirk, he's very prominent in the Pacific community, particularly to those that adhered to his values. You pushed for Parliament to acknowledge the assassination. Why?
Because it was an opportunity for Parliament to say that we repudiate political violence. A person who went to a university campus, as he often did, to try and deal with controversial issues of the day, controversial issues of the day, using reason, using argument, but not attacking the person. That person was brutally murdered in front of thousands of people. And I think it would have been a very good thing for our Parliament just to take a moment to say we reject that. We all stand united against it. It would have been a really powerful statement. Unfortunately, the Greens and the Labor Party were not prepared to make that statement. So that's a shame, but I guess the sentiment lives on.
He once said, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. Is that free speech to you or hate speech?
Well, it's pretty stupid speech, but again, this is kind of the point, right? Like, as soon as you start picking through each thing that this guy has said in 11, 12 years, I think, of public life, then you can very easily find idiotic things that he said. And yet the answer to that is not that, maybe shooting him was okay. The answer to that is just to say, well, that's a really, really stupid idea. We can use reason and logic. As far as I'm aware, to qualify as a pilot in the United States, you face no discrimination. You must pass the same tests and exams regardless of your background. And so any pilot who's got the qualifications is equally capable. His statement's obviously stupid, but that's how we should deal with it, is point out when statements are stupid rather than attacking the person.
Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour, sharp as tack as always. Thank you very much for your time. You have a lovely rest of your day.
Real pleasure, Will. You have a great day too.
Cheers.